In Alberta, our lakes and lake shores are becoming increasingly busy places. More and more of our lake shorelines are being impacted by recreational use, cottage developments, and other land use activities. Some of this extra use is putting a strain on the ecological value of these special places, problems for water quality and wildlife. One way you can help is to become involved with shoreline riparian restoration projects in your own backyard or with your lakeshore community group or municipality. This video showcases a recent project we did in the Pigeon Lake Watershed aimed at improving riparian health along the lakeshore. This project is part of a demonstration, street-to-stream initiative led by Cows and Fish, the Alberta Riparian Habitat Management Society, and the Alberta Low Impact Development Partnership in collaboration with the Pigeon Lake Watershed Association and a local landowner. In this video, we will discuss some of the key steps for planning and executing a simple shoreline riparian restoration project to help you get started with yours. We will explain some very simple techniques involving live willow cuttings to show you just how easy it is to make a big difference for your lake. This project took place on a typical Alberta residential lakefront property where the shoreline had largely been converted to shallow-rooted Kentucky bluegrass lawn and much of the native vegetation had disappeared. These common alterations over time led to erosion of the shoreline and an influx of undesirable weeds. Cumulatively, changes like this to our lakeshore take away important habitat for fish and wildlife and lead to an influx of nutrient inputs, ultimately creating problems like algae blooms. The more you fertilize and mow your lawn, the worse the problem becomes. So, where to start to restore a site like this and bring back some of the missing pieces of a healthy shoreline? Well, first you need to understand what is missing. To do this, try to find an undisturbed natural reference site in the vicinity of your project to point you in the right direction. We were lucky in having an environmental reserve close by that helped inform our riparian planting plan. In our case, we could see that native willows and balsam poplars and shrubs like red osier dogwood were flourishing within the reserve lands. We made sure to include these species in our planting plan. The plan we developed was separated into a shoreline component and an inland riparian component. This video will focus on the shoreline portion of the project. For the shoreline component, our plan was to install live willow cuttings along the bank, with a gap in the middle to allow for continued use of a boat dock that is removed before winter each year. Willows grow quickly and have deep root structures, making them an ideal species for stabilizing shorelines and adding wildlife habitat at the same time. Dormant live willow cuttings have a unique ability to sprout and take root when planted into moist soil, making them ideal for restoration projects. An important part of planning a project like this is to make sure you have all the necessary permits you may need well in advance. Permitting can be a time-consuming process, so it's important to allow ample time for this. So once you have your plan in place, the next step is to contact your local government office to check what permits you may need. Since riparian projects take place along the shoreline or bank of a water body, in Alberta, Provincial Water Act, Public Lands Act, or Federal Fisheries Act approvals may be needed. For this project, we sent our design plans along with a detailed explanation of the project to Alberta Environment and Parks. We also submitted our design plan to the local Summer Village municipality since our lakeshore includes an environmental reserve piece they administer. Our plan was given the thumbs up, and we were given the green light to go ahead without the need of specific approvals. However, we had to ensure we did not disturb the lake bed, remove rocks from the bank, or do any work directly in the water. Generally, for projects that involve willow staking, the best way to acquire the willow stakes is to harvest them from the surrounding area. Because willows need to be dormant when harvested and planted as live stakes, they can be harvested in the fall after they've dropped their leaves, or in the spring before leaves emerge. For this project, we were able to obtain permission from the county to harvest willows on their reserve lands and roadside ditches in October. Areas were scouted ahead of time to ensure appropriate species were present and enough stakes could be harvested. A general rule of thumb is that you do not want to harvest more than a third of a single plant to prevent damaging the donor plant. When harvesting, you want to cut as low to the ground as possible on an angle. This angle helps you to distinguish top from bottom of the cut stake and also helps when planting, since the angle goes in the ground easier than a blunt end. Stakes should be at least an inch in diameter and approximately 1 meter in length. Longer willow limbs can potentially be cut into more than one stake. Take care to ensure all harvested plant material is alive and vigorous. Harvested branches should be green and soft if the bark is scraped away. Diseased limbs should be pruned off or not harvested. Also, be careful to clean pruning materials so as to avoid spread of disease or fungus from one plant to another. Typically, you want to harvest all the plant materials a day or two in advance so that you can soak them in water overnight to promote growth and fully hydrate them. We used large Rubbermaid containers filled with water to store the plant materials until planting. Prior to starting any planting, you want to prepare the site to give the plantings the best possible chance of survival. Invasive species should ideally be removed several times over the growing season prior to planting. In this case, 1 bag was removed a few months before planting, and 14 more bags were removed on the day of planting. It's important to know what removal techniques are best suited for removing the weed species on your site. For example, ox-eye daisy needs to be dug out rather than pulled out because roots need to be removed as a group and not broken into pieces to avoid potential for regrowth. Finally, the fun part. Approximately 60 willow stakes were planted along the bank with 1 to 2 feet between stakes. To plant the stakes, a small hole must first be dug using a shovel or planting bar. The hole must be deep enough so that 3/4 of the stake would be below ground and only 1/4 above ground. If too much is above ground, the stake will desiccate or dry out and likely not survive. The next step is to place the stake in the hole with the angled end pointing downward and backfill the soil. It's important to pack the soil in as close as possible to the stake so that there are no air pockets. Stakes with more contact with the soil will not dry out as readily and have more places to set roots, so deeper placement and ensuring a well-packed hole are key. Stakes were also angled slightly away from the water so that they were less likely to be damaged from ice action, since this lake is prone to large piles of wind-blown ice being pushed up on the shore. At this site, the stakes were left slightly longer than the recommended 4 to 6 inches due to a high water table being able to provide additional moisture. Stakes should not be installed into permanently saturated soils as they will not survive. Fascines are bundles of several individual stakes that are placed in a trench and covered with soil. This technique was selected for this site since the fascines would be less exposed to potential ice action and had potential for substantial root growth. The first step is to tie several, in this case 4 willow stakes together using biodegradable twine. The stakes were placed in opposite directions so that roots would grow from both ends of the bundle. Next, we dug a trench slightly larger than the bundle of stakes. You must then place the bundle in the trench and backfill with soil so that 90% of the bundle is covered. Once again, the soil must be packed in to remove any air pockets that might be present. Once everything has been planted, the entire site was watered to provide moisture and prevent the stakes from drying out. Over the winter, the snow will provide cover and help to insulate the stakes. You have to spend all this time and hard work planning and planting, so now what? Ideally, you should monitor and care for the site over the next 3 years while the plants are becoming established. A key part of this involves frequently weeding and watering your new plantings. It takes a while for the plant roots to grow, so giving willow cuttings a lot of water in the first few years makes a big difference to their survival success. Keeping the weeds at bay will also give your new plantings a big helping hand. Weeds left unchecked can shade out plantings and compete for moisture. It's also important to monitor your site for beaver or other wildlife herbivory. If necessary, appropriate fencing should be installed to protect new plantings in the short term. Fencing may also be needed for publicly accessible sites to protect restoration areas from being trampled. Frequent monitoring of the site is the best way to make sure you take proactive steps to nip potential problems in the bud and give your project the best shot at success. Weeding and watering are going to really help ensure that your project succeeds, and so having a committed landowner and local partners is important. These plants won't have extensive root systems at the beginning, and by providing water, you're giving them that extra boost they need, especially during dry spells. Riparian restoration projects require a lot of coordination and teamwork from numerous community groups and other organizations. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. We would like to thank everyone involved with this project as well as our funders. For more information and other helpful videos, please visit our website at cowsandfish.org.